The geography of poverty is changing quite profoundly, and there are basically two stories about two accounts to interpret how this is changing. One is about income levels, and that is that poverty is increasingly becoming concentrated in middle-income countries. Another is fundamentally about fragility and conflict-affected countries, and says that as stable countries grow and prosper, increasingly poverty will become concentrated on unstable countries. Let me give you an example of these categories. In the category of fast-growing middle-income countries, obviously you have the giants of China and India and the like. In the category of deeply conflicted countries that have had real struggle in growing, you have things like DR Congo, and you have other low and middle-income countries. But there is a consistency between these two, because quite a lot of poor are now found in countries like Nigeria and indeed Pakistan, which are both populous and middle income. And that's why increasingly these two categories overlap. Well, these two accounts are both driven to some extent by politics. In the case of the capable, fast-growing, emerging countries, the big giants in particular, this is a story about increasingly having the capabilities to deal with poverty in your own domestic context, but there might not be the political consensus to do it, and you have to address that weakness. In the case of fragile states, particularly the weakest ones, there is a real question of abilities, as well as perhaps sometimes a question of unwillingness. Well, I think these stories have big implications for both the whys and the hows of aid. If you're thinking about the whys, it's quite compelling that you can't just stand by fragile states and wait for and tolerate state collapse. You can't do that, both because of the horrendous hardship this causes within the countries, and also because of the risks of contagion to neighbouring countries and the world community. So there's a fairly clear-cut case about the why you should intervene, but that doesn't necessarily tell you how to intervene. If, on the other hand, you start to look at the more capable countries, then you're telling rather subtler stories about the abilities of outsiders to influence change inside a country. And that may not be very welcome, and it may not be very easy to demonstrate. On the other hand, if you're talking about hows, we typically find that it's easier to tell a story about how investments work very well in quite sophisticated middle-income countries that have stable contexts. We have a harder time explaining exactly how we have the ingredients to make places like Afghanistan and further afield succeed, because it is genuinely very difficult, and the track record of intervention of aid in those contexts is not yet very well understood by everybody. So, as a result of this, there's a big challenge, and this is a real opportunity for those attending the Cape Conference and for the bigger community. Now is the time to start thinking, how might we develop new ingredients of how to deal with fragility? We shouldn't wait till 2025 to discover this.